Do you know what's better than falling in love? Breaking and entering into an evil Englishman's mansion.
You ever steal anything, Paula? What?
Hello romance girlies, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Today we're going to be doing a very brief introduction to Hyacinth Bridgerton's book, It's in His Kiss, which I have now read for the first time. To clarify, all spoilers are fair game in this video for any of the Bridgerton books except for Gregory's book, simply because that's the one that I haven't read yet. I'm telling you this now, so if you proceed further and then you try to lament the fact that I have said something about Benedict or Eloise or Francesca's books, even though half of Benedict and all of Eloise and Francesca's seasons have not been released to the public or even made yet, that's your own doing because you kept watching this video.
So I'm mad at you for being mad at me for no reason. So try and talk to me, I'm mad.
I want to quickly thank everyone that's left nice feedback on my first 4 Bridgerton reviews for season 4. I do not know yet if Netflix will be providing screeners for part 2. If they don't provide them, I won't be able to have my videos ready to drop right on opening day like I did for part 1, so in that case, I would kindly ask for your patience and understanding because I do all of this myself. I am not a mega corporation with a bunch of underpaid workers doing the lion's share of the labor.
Hello, this is fraud. On a global scale.
What I want to do for this video is introduce Hyacinth's book, and in particular, focus on more of the earlier parts of what's happening in that source material so that we as the audience can keep an eye out in the second half of season 4 as well as seasons 5 and 6 for various things that might be introduced to lead into the book canon of her story. None of us knows exactly how close of an adaptation that will be, but there might be some things we could notice that would foreshadow her love story. The main reasons I don't want to do a full plot introduction just yet are as follows. I don't have a lot of time right now to dedicate to a larger video project like that. I have some press screenings coming up for theatrical releases, which I need to prepare for by doing things like reading or rereading source material that I will need to keep in mind when I review those films. Bridgerton has been renewed for seasons 5 and 6, but it's still yet to be determined whether or not they will go ahead and finish the entire family. Now, those of you who are watching this video might assume that the show's success is enough of an indication to prove that these next 2.5 seasons will perform well enough on streaming to ensure that all 8 seasons will be completed, but here's where my line of thinking is. People did not expect that we would have a simultaneous strike of SAG and WGA, but that happened. People did not expect that a giant superhero franchise film would be filmed in its entirety and then just thrown away for a tax write-off, but guess what? That happened. We live in extremely peculiar times. The arts are under attack even more than usual, unfortunately, so I don't assume much of anything nowadays. I don't know what will happen in the next few years. Now, I'm not a pessimist about these things, but I'm simply not going to make assumptions. I mostly focus on mapping out the more immediate upcoming batch of what I'm planning to review, and then beyond that, I only have tentative ideas in mind. And finally, the actress who plays Hyacinth is still young to where I don't really want to be joking around about the more salacious parts of that book right now.
She's a child!
Considering how horrendously long these companies take to have a new season ready to watch, if this series is renewed for seasons 7 and 8, both of those actors will be old enough to decide for themselves whether or not they would like to do all that goes into being the lead of a Bridgerton season at that point in time. All of that is why we are going to be focusing instead on just the lead up to Hyacinth's story. What leads into the beginning of her book canon that might be presented on the Netflix series. The basic premise of Hyacinth's book is that her endgame love interest is a man named Gareth St, who is the grandson of Lady Danbury. Hyacinth is going to Lady Danbury's every week to read to her, and they have a fun friendship where Hyacinth looks up to Lady Danbury for her outspokenness and strong personality. Broadly speaking, Hyacinth's book personality read in a way that felt similar to show Eloise's personality. There's a quote from the book that reads, "Men don't like women who are more intelligent than they are, and Hyacinth Bridgerton isn't the sort to feign stupidity." Her eventual husband, Gareth St, has an extremely bad relationship with his father, so a bit like Simon, I suppose. The book's prologue takes place 10 years before the main story begins. Prologue Gareth is 18 years old. He's been attending Eton and spends a minimal amount of time at home with his father because of how much they don't get along with one another. Gareth's mother had died in an accident when he was 5 years old. Gareth is a second son, a bit like Benedict. Lady Danbury's daughter was Gareth's mother. During this prologue, Lord St. Clair has summoned Gareth and informs him that he needs to marry a woman named Mary Winthrop in order to access her dowry, which would restore their family finances. Gareth doesn't want to marry her. They have known each other since they were children, and the book describes Mary as being simple in the head. They would play together as children, but as they got older, that was when Gareth began to notice that her development wasn't advancing like everyone else's. He would even go so far as to fight bullies more than once on her behalf. Now that they are both older, Gareth regards Mary as having the mental capabilities of a child, so Gareth believes it would be a sin to marry her. Moreover, Gareth's father says some really gross things about Gareth having to eventually consummate this marriage with Mary, and Gareth knows that this is wrong, so he refuses to go through with it, and as a result, his father disowns him and takes this one step further by telling Gareth that he, Lord St. Clair, is not Gareth's biological father. Gareth's mother was with someone else, but Lord St. Clair doesn't know who. Following this rift, Gareth is able to have a place of his own eventually because his mother had, I believe, left him a bit of money. But the first place that he goes to is Lady Danbury's, and the two of them remain extremely close. Gareth also does get along really well with his older brother, George, who was set to inherit everything as he was the heir. Although, if Lord St. Clair had had his way, George would have also cut Gareth off and no longer treated him as family. But George and Gareth still got along really well until George's death, which takes place between the prologue and the main portion of the book. Now, let's jump ahead 10 years to when the bulk of the story actually takes place. Hyacinth has been on the marriage mart for 3 seasons. Now, I'm a bit unclear of whether that means that she is still in her 3rd season or she has finished her 3rd season. I don't know all of the details of Tawn seasons and their timelines. I mean, that's rich parasite nonsense.
It makes no damn sense.
That being said, if Hyacinth on the show is on the cusp of making her debut into the Tawn during season 4, and she's been trying to sneak into events early, we may presume that she would make her official debut during season 5 and do her 2nd Tawn season in season 6, and then find her happily ever after in her 3rd season during season 7, assuming that the show gets renewed. The timeline of that seems as though it would line up nicely with the book canon. Gareth is 28 years old during this main portion of the story. We have met Lady Danbury on the show and spent plenty of time with her, but currently in season 4, it appears as though there's a sort of setup happening that could potentially give her some time off from the show, or go away and be gone for a season or a sizable duration of the next season if there's some information I'm unaware of pertaining to Adjoa, the actress who plays her. I'm not aware of it. Perhaps she wants to do another job in the meanwhile. But regardless of whether or not the character goes away for a full season of the Netflix series or is absent for part of a Netflix season, whenever this character returns, if they wanted to modify Gareth's introduction on the show, she could return and bring him with her. Now, I'm not making any prediction or demands about how similar or dissimilar his backstory should be for the show. We're simply doing a bit of early speculation for no reason other than we can. When you meet Hyacinth and Gareth within this book of her love story, they already know each other. If a similar timeline were to be used on the Netflix series, we would probably have them meet either in season 5 or 6. Maybe they could end season 5 with a cute little reveal like they did for Michaela, where they go, okay, here's one of the endgame love interests that you will have to look forward to. Gareth and Hyacinth don't have their first noteworthy conversation beyond superficial high society socializing until we are in Hyacinth's book. If the show does introduce Gareth earlier than season 7, perhaps they could build some of the early chemistry so that when it's officially their turn to be the main couple, they would have more of a foundation built for their relationship. That would be another way that they could have their own unique identity as a pair, since people like Daphne, Antony, Benedict, and possibly Eloise are only meeting their love interests for the first time, officially, in their season. I say possibly, Eloise, just because at the time of recording this, I haven't seen part 2 of season 4 yet, so we don't know if they will do anything different to let those two meet before season 5 begins, which is when we are all assuming they will get to be the main couple. We've seen Philip in older seasons of the Netflix series, but nothing more has been shown of him since then. In Hyacinth's book, she has reached a point where the excitement of the Tawn, of being out in high society, has dissipated. We see Hyacinth on the show currently is very eager to debut. She wants to get out there, go to these events, dance with suitors. If her destination on the show is something similar to the book, we will presumably see an arc that follows that. She can debut in season 5 and be excited by the novelty, and then realize that actually Eloise was right. This sucks. These people are boring and the men are naff. Maybe her season 5 arc could be something involving your expectations not being met. It's frivolous, shallow, and not particularly fun to be in the Tawn.
But I knew who they were, and I told her who they were. Shitheads.
In the book, Hyacinth is said to have already received other marriage proposals, but it's always been men who are not good matches. Hyacinth is not interested in any of them. They're not even all that good of a match on paper, and they're not men whom even Violet, in all of her enthusiastic matchmaking glory, would be inclined to push Hyacinth towards. Maybe Show Hyacinth could experience a proposal or two from men that she doesn't really know all that well or have any significant connection with. So then, by the time Hyacinth would reach her 3rd season in the Tawn, she would be like her book counterpart, where she is now bored of being around the same people over and over again. If season 5 is her debut, and it doesn't live up to the hype in her own mind, perhaps season 6 could be when Gareth is introduced into the mix, and then they could make their first acquaintance. There's definitely a sense of matchmaking in the book that is coming from both Violet and Lady Danbury. They want these two to get together. I think back to season 2 after the wedding mishap when Violet and Lady Danbury are just alone together and they begin cackling at how much of a mess things are. I think it could be really fun if those two were to team up, particularly if they see the potential between Hyacinth and Gareth in season 6 before Hyacinth and Gareth themselves even realize that this could be something good. That could be a fun way to lead into season 7. Now, Gareth, like more or less all of the men in these books, is a slag who's allowed to be because he's a man. He's described as being handsome as sin with a wicked reputation. So what, like Michael? Except he's insecure about his social standing because of the circumstances of his birth. Like Sophie. And he's got a terrible father skulking around, like Simon. And Gareth himself is only skulking around with actresses and opera singers, so like season 1 Antony. But I mentioned this promiscuity and his issues with his father because it does play into him not being all that inclined to marry. It's not something he is actively seeking out, and even when he starts to become more conscious of his attraction to Hyacinth and his interest in being with her, one of his reasons for hesitating to do things like get engaged or married is that Gareth is concerned that his father might try to sabotage the relationship with her. Lady Danbury being close with the Bridgerton family and Gareth's hesitation to throw himself into the marriage mart could work in tandem so that Gareth and Hyacinth on the show would be in each other's orbit. We would get to see some early bits of chemistry and banter, but not too much to where the audience is asking, well, why don't they just become a couple right then and there before it's time for them to have their own season? The main thing that throws Gareth and Hyacinth into a version of the forced proximity trope is that Gareth's dead brother, George, has a widow named Caroline who visits Gareth and gives him a small diary which had belonged to their other grandmother. She was the mother of their cartoon villain of a father, Lord St. Clair. This grandmother came from Italy, and thus the diary is written in Italian.
Ferre, Armani, and Versace.
Gareth brings the diary to Lady Danbury because he believes that she is well connected enough to know someone, or how to find someone, that might be able to translate the diary. The day that he goes over to ask Lady Danbury about this, guess who is also over to read to Lady Danbury as they do every week? Hyacinth Bridgerton, of course, and guess who had an Italian governess when she was young, and thus is not fluent in Italian, but can make out the general meaning of what's in the diary? Hyacinth Bridgerton. Something, we fast forward a bit, and this foray into translating family history evolves into a search for some hidden family jewels. meaning that the particular Bridgerton love story could have a hybrid genre of not just being a romance, but being an adventure mystery type of romance. Now, me personally, I'm hoping that there will be at least a couple of writers in the writer's room for that season who are a fan of The Lost City, starring Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, because if I get even a sliver of that film's vibe in an adaptation of Hyacinth's book, there would be great potential for me to have a really fun time watching that season.
I thought maybe it was a metaphor. It's not. The Well of Endless Tears is a place.
All of this to say that if we get any sort of passing mention from Season 4 Part 2 or Seasons 5 and 6 of Hyacinth and Italian, that would qualify as an Easter egg for people who have read the book or follow along with discussions of the source material to lead into her season. Moreover, I would also say that if they make any sort of mention of Hyacinth being proficient in any other language, regardless of whether or not it's Italian, that could still be a clue. The plot could be largely the same, even if Gareth's paternal grandmother isn't someone from Italy, just some other language that is not English. Probably not French, though, just because French has been more prominently featured in Banofi's season, so I think it would make more sense to use a language that only Hyacinth would know, so that you can maintain that forced proximity between the two of them, and you don't give Gareth an excuse to just avoid Hyacinth and ask someone else. To summarize, I think the main things we would want to keep an eye out for in regards to the parts that might lead towards Hyacinth's book canon, these are the things I would pick out. What are Hyacinth's feelings about society? Is she enthusiastic about debuting? And does that enthusiasm dissipate over time? Maybe an unappealing marriage proposal at some point. That last bit might not need to happen though, because book Eloise was said to have received other marriage proposals before her love story happens, so they could just as easily scrap the other marriage proposals for Hyacinth before her season, because we haven't seen anyone propose to Eloise on the show. Has Lady Danbury gone off somewhere, and has she brought anyone back with her upon returning, and is that person an eligible grandson? Does Hyacinth know a good amount of Italian, and if not Italian, some other random language that no one else in their immediate social circles knows? I was thinking about how Benedict getting his endgame would work as a way of fueling Eloise to go off and end up having a love story of her own. In the book, Eloise feels more alone than ever at the beginning of the story because she thought that she would have Penelope to keep her company in spinsterhood. But now, by that point, Penelope has gone off and married Colin. Now, the show timeline is different since they swapped the order between Colin and Benedict, but that also worked out fine for Show Eloise because Show Eloise has been shown to be particularly close to Show Benedict. If she's alone now without her closest confidants, maybe it's time to do something out of the ordinary and consequently put herself on the trajectory for her happily ever after to happen at the end of season 5. Eloise's book story involves a death, that being the death of Marina, who is currently married to Philip, who is Eloise's endgame love interest. Francesca's love story also involved a death. John dies, and then her second love story is with Michael in the book and Michaela on the show. Thematically, it could make sense to have the topic of death and loss overlap in this way. You can bring up the recurring sense of loss felt in the Bridgerton family about Edmund and the way that that extends across many different members of the family. Then you would have the loss of Marina and the loss of John, and if both of those were to happen in season 5, you would be able to give Francesca enough time to mourn so that it wouldn't feel like too abrupt of a transition to the fun parts of a new love story taking place. If we follow that thread, then I do wonder if and what they might do to have a thematic overlap for Francesca's love story in what I'm guessing would be season 6, with what would presumably be Hyacinth happening in season 7. Now, it's far too early to make any strong predictions in that regard, but I figure that I might as well pose that question now so that we can keep it in mind as we make our way through the next 2.5 seasons of Bridgerton. I'm assuming we're going to get an official confirmation of Eloise being season 5 within these next couple of weeks. At that time, it would make more sense to shift focus and have the majority of the Bridgerton discussions be about that material, because it will be Eloise's turn to be in the spotlight. Now, if the premise interests you, just go visit your local library and pick up a copy. That's what I always do when I'm going to research source material. If you don't like the writing style of these books, or you just don't want to prioritize reading this particular book, I do plan on returning to it at some point in the future, and that's when we will be able to go through all of the Hyacinth and Gareth love story details. And that only leaves Gregory's book for me to still read for the first time, but I have no plans on doing that soon, unless they give Gregory a much larger storyline in the next 4 episodes of Bridgerton Season 4. I just don't see any reason to go that far ahead right now. If you've made it this far, feel free to put your Bridgerton book rankings in the comments, because it has been a while since I last asked that question to the audience. So maybe there are some new viewers here. Maybe your opinions have shifted over time about this or that book. I feel like Hyacinth and Francesca's books are often rated favorably from people who comment on my Bridgerton videos when I ask people to share their rankings. And come to think of it, I don't really remember where Gregory's book ends up on people's lists. Maybe somewhere in the middle? I don't know if I remember there being an overwhelming consensus regarding his love story, but I don't remember it being a common pick for highest and lowest. That's all I'll say for the time being. I wouldn't be able to do a ranking of the books myself because it's been so many years since I read Daphne's book that I barely remember the details.
Don't look at me, I don't know a thing.